There's an absolute meltdown truly happening in the European Union. Friends, I honestly can't recall a time when all the heads of European ministries of foreign affairs urgently convened in one location to discuss exclusively one topic. The main topic revolves around Trump's peace plan, a confidential document that surfaced yesterday in several highly respected and well-known publications. Politico was the first to publish it. There's a lot of talk now, details, and some absolutely incredible things that are supposedly in it. Nevertheless, Kaja Kallas, whom some in Brussels had somewhat dismissed, is actually demonstrating considerable initiative and exhibiting precisely those leadership qualities that Brussels currently requires. Therefore, Europe's chief diplomat is assembling all her counterparts today, and it's quite evident to me that they are formulating a response. It appears unequivocally clear that no peace plans whatsoever, regardless of whether they encompass 28, 38, or even 158 provisions, are capable of being successfully put into effect without the involvement of both Ukraine and the European Union being present. Any peace agreement requires approval, first and foremost from Kyiv and also from Brussels, for it to proceed. Only then will the involvement of the United States of America be truly valued and appreciated. And Moscow isn't even part of the discussion because Moscow is the aggressor. Well, that's their answer. I'm unsure how appropriate it is for today, whether you agree with it or not, but this is unequivocally Europe's current stance. And if anyone believed the European Union would merely stand idly by and passively nod in agreement with Donald Trump exclaiming, "Oh, what a relief," you, my friend, have saved us from the necessity of finding 135 billion euros by April of next year. Well, my friends, you are profoundly mistaken, because this very moment with Kaja Kallas truly highlights something quite intriguing. It significantly challenges the prevailing pragmatism in which we all find ourselves living, where money and trade are considered absolutely everything. But here, you see, it truly doesn't matter how deeply Ukraine was not embroiled in Mingich Gate, nor how ardently Trump desires his Nobel Peace Prize. It's also irrelevant what the Russian Federation's stance may be, that the conflict is an existential one, demanding spheres of influence, and so on and so forth. The fact remains, a sound and proper position still exists. While money and other such considerations are indeed important, they become secondary when confronted with matters concerning national sovereignty and statehood. Any talk about Ukraine having to capitulate, that it must cede territories and so on, is being rejected by Brussels today. So that's indeed the assessment of what has transpired. So what exactly is this peace plan? Part of it is already quite clear, wouldn't you say? I mean, everyone thought it was some kind of leak. No, it's not a leak, because the Secretary of State of the United States, Marco Rubio, right here is commenting today, confirming that this information is indeed accurate and true. The peace plan really exists. This peace plan truly does exist. Indeed, it was genuinely being developed. So, in his opinion, what exactly is it? Marco Rubio quoted, "The cessation of a complex and deadly war, such as the one currently unfolding in Ukraine, necessitates a comprehensive exchange of earnest and pragmatic ideas." Let's really consider those specific adjectives, shall we? Earnest and pragmatic ideas. Achieving an enduring and lasting peace necessitates that both involved parties are willing to make challenging yet essential concessions. Therefore, we persist in developing a comprehensive list of potential concepts for resolving this conflict, ideas that fundamentally stem from the proposals put forth by both factions involved in the dispute. Indeed, these are truly realistic ideas, specifically derived from and firmly rooted in the proposals advanced by both sides implicated in the ongoing conflict. I will now address the proposals that have been put forth and reported in Politico, the Financial Times, and also in the Washington Post. In fact, pretty much everywhere, and even Ukrainian media outlets have extensively covered this topic, reporting a great deal on the matter. So these realistic ideas stem from both sides. The Washington Post, for example, writes that all the ideas presented in the 28 points of the plan, they belong, well, practically to Putin, and Putin actually articulated these very ideas in Alaska. So there's that. Check out the Washington Post, where you can also read about this. Next, other publications such as Sky News and Bloomberg report that this peace plan might have originated with Putin's special representative Kirill Dmitriev and that it involves both parties' friends. The second edition says, and the third Bloomberg no. Kirill Dmitriev leaked it, correct? Sky News and Bloomberg reference a deleted post by Witkoff, the very same Witkoff who, this past summer, neglected to bring his stenographer along when he met with Putin. Witkoff X, the one who revealed the leak of this information. Perhaps he received it from K. Journalists widely believe that the initial K in this context actually signifies Kirill, specifically the name Kirill Dmitriev, don't they? And a publication like the Wall Street Journal, I'll now provide you with a quote, states that the peace plan is highly likely to encounter resolute opposition from both Ukraine and Europe. This is already happening just a day after the existence of this peace plan became known. Europe has already issued its statement. Kyiv, well, its official response is being drafted at this very moment. I expect that either tomorrow or possibly later tonight we'll get to hear all about it. That's because representatives, specifically 2 generals from the general staff, have arrived in Ukraine. Furthermore, Secretary of the Army Driscoll has also made his arrival. You can see him in the photo. It's a protocol photo taken today during the meeting with Prime Minister Sviridenko. A meeting with Volodymyr Zelensky is reported. No statements from me yet. Perhaps you'll see it all in Volodymyr Zelensky's traditional evening address. However, they dispatched Driscoll specifically to observe and gauge what the resulting reaction might be. Then Driscoll is expected to go to Moscow. This is still an unconfirmed point, but there's a strong 90% probability that Driscoll will go to Moscow. Now, back to the realistic ideas. We've understood how the plan emerged. Now, let's turn to the realistic ideas that are currently under discussion. Today, Z channels. It's a very telling moment, friends. The Russian Z channels consistently begin to vocalize their grievances whenever they perceive any kind of hawkish injustice, particularly when they feel that the very worm they had anticipated consuming is being snatched away from their grasp, leaving them feeling cheated and indignant. You know, it's about war, seizing Kyiv, advancing to Lviv, then Warsaw, and eventually driving our tanks straight into Berlin. And here's the crucial point that acts as the primary irritant for the Russians today, specifically for those belligerent Russians who are advocating for war. This is a report published in yet another reputable publication, The Telegraph, which states that Russia apparently would retain control of the Donbas region in return for a rental payment, all as part of the proposed US plan. This implies Russia would preserve control. Indeed, it would retain dominion over the Donbas region in return for a payment. Here it mentions rental fee, which essentially means a land tax, correct? This aligns with the United States plan. Hence, the realistic proposal, reportedly originating from one of the parties, presents itself in this very fashion. And today, it intensely triggers Moscow and the Kremlin, particularly these propagandists, to an extraordinary degree. Why? It's because there's no actual seizure of the Donbas region. Donbas for rent. Donbas for rent. You know, when you encounter such news, you understand that, well, perhaps it's quite absurd. It truly doesn't make any sense at all, or something of that nature. But I understand where this idea could have come from. So this is a formalized account, and I'm explaining that I absolutely do not endorse any territorial concessions whatsoever. I believe, and this is an official stance that I wholeheartedly support, as well as being the official position of both Kyiv and Brussels, that absolutely no territorial concessions can be made. But this is more than just a clever strategic move. As I'm saying, it's a move with something. More than just a knight's move, right? Why? Because that's the concept. From a legal standpoint, if a certain territory is leased, it does not necessitate any changes to the constitution, nor does it require any votes by a constitutional majority, and absolutely no referendums are needed for such an action, correct? This would destroy the person who undertakes it. If Zelensky were to sign such a deal, it would politically ruin him, wouldn't it? However, conversely, it brings an end to the entire matter of whether there is control or an absence of it. Legally, the entire Donbas region would remain Ukrainian, meaning that part of Donbas that the Russian Federation can't conquer. However, in actuality, the Russian Federation would utilize all the natural resources and assets belonging to the Ukrainian people, effectively paying some form of rental fee in return. So, in short, yes, a realistic idea that was heard and is being worked on in the United States. It's simply that. What comes next is the official reaction. This is but one of the concepts. I'd rather not spend time enumerating further propositions, such as the slyly formulated reduction, not of defensive units, but specifically the armed forces of Ukraine by a factor of 2.5. Wouldn't you agree? Well, let's consider this. The armed forces of Ukraine, Volodymyr Zelensky mentioned a figure of approximately 700,000. That refers to the armed forces. There are also other defense forces that are joining. Say 700,000 is the total, cut by 2.5 times. So we are returning to that specific number. What was it again? Was it 300,000 individuals? Well, that's more than before the full-scale invasion. So the United States hopes this is a reasonable offer for Kyiv. So you went into the open, the full-scale invasion with 250,000, and you'll come out with 300. Great, that's more than you had. Another very realistic proposal, and so forth. I mean, honestly, there isn't much more to discuss simply because all of it is pretty unrealistic. But understanding the principles of diplomacy, you, as a consumer of this information, have to realize the most incredible story is consistently put forth initially. Subsequently, it is scaled back to the most realistic and achievable level. Perhaps this is what Marco Rubio truly intends when he articulates all of this. The reaction of the Russian MIN, the Russian government, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I should remind you that this particular plan is often credited to Dmitriev. And so Lavrov and his entire team are, my friends, essentially Dmitriev's antagonists. And Kommersant, for example, quickly published an interview with the ambassador in Washington, with Russia's ambassador in Washington, about the prospects of relations with the United States. And well, the main point is clear. A stalled dialogue doesn't imply its termination. It's as if, hey, we're back in the saddle again. We've been idle for a month, but now see how everything has truly taken off. Peskov also unequivocally declared today, well, there's absolutely nothing new to report, is there? Well, essentially, nothing particularly novel is occurring. However, please observe this situation.
Erdogan stated that he hopes for the continuation of the Stockholm process. Moscow is open to continuing talks, open to negotiations. The suspension in talks arose, in fact, due to the Kievan regime's persistent reluctance to pursue this dialogue further.
Well, that's it. So there's really nothing new to report on this front either. According to the leading spokesman within the Russian Federation, and not just the Z publics, no truly extraordinary events are currently taking place. Next, what's our reaction? You can guess what it is, more or less. We are now awaiting an official statement from President Zelensky that, well, this whole story is going a bit off track. Okay, just a little more about the Russians. The Ministry of Foreign Affairs is quite wary of negotiations, emphasizing the need for a clear discussion of all details. Simultaneously, signals were sent to Americans showing readiness for broader talks. One such gesture is the very cautious statement by Russia's ambassador to Washington, Darchev. I mentioned him, right? He stressed the need to react calmly to Trump's statements about a possible resumption of nuclear tests by the American side, as such statements are driven by a desire to ensure U.S. military superiority. The sources confirmed that Kyiv did not participate in drafting the agreement, noting that the negotiations themselves included a much broader range of issues, not just the SMO in Ukraine. So it's pretty clear, isn't it, how this is all being presented? You have some character, Dmitriev from the Kremlin, and Peskov, who supposedly resolved matters and effectively reinstated this entire negotiation process. And there's the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, which states that, yes, we are talking to the United States, but not concerning Ukraine at all. That's just a small part of it. We are the global arbiters of peace. That's what's occurring. Kyiv wasn't asked, and here's why. Because, yes, they weren't invited because the negotiations themselves included a broader range of issues. So, friends, this isn't any genuine peace plan. It's simply Washington and Moscow idly chatting with Trump and Putin or their representatives discussing various things and then suddenly deciding, oh, let's just involve Ukraine here too. Essentially, this is exactly what it's all really about. Therefore, do not anticipate, for instance, the cessation of the war by Monday, and certainly refrain from reading any further absurdities of this nature. I wanted to end with this. Look, they've started to hype it up from all sides. I'm already reading many posts like this from opinion leaders, like Natalia Mosichuk, right? Of course, you shouldn't steal, especially when the country is drowning in blood. But who still believes this anti-corruption scandal aligning with the Ankara surrender offer is just coincidence? Don't be a pushover, you say? Well, my friends, that's precisely the point. Well, there's Milanov, for example, a Yermak associate. Once again, the Americans are mistaken, thinking they can push Ukraine around. Trump predictably leveraged Minich Gates, pressuring Zelensky to accept Moscow's demands, reducing the army, ceding territory, limiting arms, and more. That just truly won't work. I simply Mr. Milanov and Mrs. Mosichuk, they are asserting that. So we have a corruption scandal, which is a convenient moment for Trump. Trump seized it. But in this manner, both Mr. Milanov and Mosichuk are essentially working against us, or rather, for the opposing side. They're stating that if these things are connected, it's not for nothing. Then someone must have been conspiring about this matter. Friends, I think it's highly improbable. Neither option seems likely. Is not actually taking place. This is a distinct matter. But naturally, with the current political climate in Ukraine, anything can be twisted and manipulated in any direction at present. But I'll end with what I started with. So, Brussels. Today, Brussels is, without a doubt, firmly aligned with, or let me express it this way, completely supports Kyiv's official stance. Despite this, and in the European Union statement, there's absolutely no mention of a threatening corruption situation, that could somehow influence the matter of, for example, ceding the Donbas region to the Russian Federation. It's simply, truly, absolutely unbelievable. That could only exist in a sick imagination somewhere on some Telegram channels. That's all.